Hello everyone and welcome to Tailored Acres. I'm Taylor and I am a gardener in Wisconsin, Zone 4B, and my last frost date is May 15th. And that last frost date is important because of the content of this video being about cool flowers and cool vegetables. So cool flowers are flowers that don't mind a light frost, and then also the same with the vegetables. So these are really special things to grow, especially in Wisconsin, because we can get a head start on our season. So some zones are able to plant some of these things out in the fall, which would be amazing here. There's nothing I have found so far that will withstand our winters, being in zone 4 with, I think it's like a -30 low. So these are all spring planted flowers for us. So here's my backyard right now, and you can see we are under much snow, but we are actually 12 weeks out from our last frost date already, and that is when I am going to be starting all of these plants that we're going to talk about today. So as I said, my last frost date is May 15th, and you can find that on the Farmer's Almanac, and it's by zip code. So even though we may be the same zone, the last frost date is a different element. So don't think, oh yeah, I'm zone 4 as well, because your last frost date may be very different. I do plan this as the first video of a series about cool crops. And so this first one will be about seed starting and when to do it, and the couple of things to watch out for when starting the seeds so early. The next one will be about planting out and when that happens, all those details, and then maybe I'll do a third video follow-up of like when we reach our last frost date, and then maybe a fourth one about when they start blooming, because all of that is super relevant information to when you start it and how the process will work for you. So I wanted to give a shout out to this book here, and I'll put a link to it in the description. It is probably backwards for you, but the Cut Flower Handbook by Lisa Mason Ziegler. It has awesome information. She is in a much warmer zone than me, so some of this is adapted from the knowledge in this book, but what a great resource this is. So I'm going to be going through a list of the flowers and vegetables that I'm going to be using this cold method on, but there are also cold sown seeds. So when I plant these seedlings out is about when I'm going to be starting those seeds. So that will be covered in that video because it doesn't really pay to talk about it now, and we're still weeks away from that. So next, let's talk about your seed starting setup. So this is mine here. I have a rack, and I have a video explaining how I have all this set up. So these lights have worked out great for me. I should probably get a whole nother setup because I have so many seeds to start, but you're gonna want a nice setup if you're starting seeds this early inside. You want to give them the best chance possible. A window is just probably not going to work out well for you. You're going to get really leggy, possibly sickly seedlings. So have a good setup. I do also have a heat mat. And even though these are cool flowers, most of them I put on the heat mat because it still speeds up germination. And then this room stays probably about 65 degrees for growing them on. And then once I'm ready to transplant them outside, we're going to harden them off still, just like normal. That's still very important so you don't shock them because they're going from such a warm environment out into the cold. So that means just introducing them slowly each day over about a week's time out into the cold. So when I decide to transplant them, I'm also going to be looking at the forecast and making sure that the low temperatures in general are above 25. Some of these plants that I'm planting are hardy lower than that, but you're really going to cripple them even if they don't die. So under 25, you're going to want to do frost protection. A lot of the time, even under 32 or 36, like you're still probably going to want to put your frost cloth out on these. So my only other seed planting tip would be to follow the directions on your packet if they are surface sown, or if they need to go deeper. It seems like a lot of these seeds are surface sown. So just watch for that, because some of them need light to germinate, and that's very important. You can't get around that. So the other thing to watch for is that some of these need cold stratification. So that means you'll need to make sure that they're cold first for a set amount of time. Usually it tells you how much, it varies per seed, so I can't give you a blanket statement. For me, a lot of those, I'm just going to winter sow them because it kind of resolves on its own then. Okay, so I'm going to start going through my flower varieties that I'm going to use this method on. And as you can see, we've already got ranunculus and anemones that have been pre-sprouted starting on February 1st. They were in the basement for 2 weeks, and now they're up here growing on. I did have mice get a bunch of them, so we'll see how many we end up with, but I'm just so thankful that I got some and that the mice didn't get all of mine. So those were started already, but technically they are cool flowers. So just thought I would mention those and that they have been started already. And the other guys that have been started already are my Lysianthus, which are doing great this year. I didn't have as good of germination as my first year, but they're doing really well growing on. So I started these, I think, December 15th. My intention was to start December 1st, but I got distracted and kind of wasn't really, Christmas was on my mind and not flower starting. So we'll see how they do this year, but I might move that earlier for next year. I also want to mention there are a lot more cool flowers than what I grow for my garden. So if you want the full list, that book is a great resource for all of them that you're able to do with this method. But I'm just going to go through the ones that I have experience with and that I will be growing this year. So the first one is yarrow, and this is a perennial here. There are a bunch of different varieties, and it makes great filler for cut flowers, but also a very beautiful perennial. The next one is new for me this year, and it is winged everlasting. So this is kind of like status and what am I going to call it? Straw flower. Wow. Combo. It's a really cool looking flower. So I'll be trying that this year. And I forgot to mention both of those I will be starting 6 weeks before my 6-week plant out. So that means 12 weeks before my last frost date. I'm going to be starting both of those. The next one is snapdragons, and these I'm also going to be starting 12 weeks before my last frost date. And these, I don't pinch them. I haven't had great luck with that with our super short growing season here, so I don't pinch mine. And I've had great luck with that. So those will be 12 weeks before as well. The next one is ornamental kale. I have some of this that I'm going to start, and those are 12 weeks. Next is blue plurum, and that one is a direct sow. Last year I direct sowed it and I didn't have good luck with it. So this year I'm going to try direct sowing again, but I'm also going to winter sow some. The next one is bachelor buttons, and I'm not actually sure if I'm going to grow these or not this year. They're kind of labor intensive to harvest them, and I'm trying to streamline my process a little bit, but I've had great luck both direct sowing and winter sowing these. They're super easy to grow. We actually have some growing inside right now. You probably saw them in my earlier clips. The next one is larkspur, and I direct seeded these last year and I didn't get any to come up. So I am going to try to winter sow them this year, and I'll let you know if I have success with that. The next one is Crispidia. These last year I started inside, but I really had a lot of struggles with the seedlings. So I'm going to give it a try this year, but these ones are also the 12 weeks before your last frost date to start them inside. The next one is Chinese forget-me-nots, and these ones are a direct sow, but I am going to be trying to winter sow them this year so that I can control exactly where they end up. The next one is Sweet William, and one thing to watch about these varieties is that it depends which kind you get. They may be first or second year flowering, and they may be perennial. They may not be perennial for your area. So based on which one you select, watch for those couple of things. I did grow some annual Sweet William that blooms first year. It was the Sweet series, absolutely beautiful. They were probably my favorite flowers last year, and they produced for me all season long, which I thought was insane. So I will be growing them again this year, and those are a 12-week indoor start. The next one is foxglove, and these did awesome for me winter sowing last year. So I will be doing winter sowing for them this year as well. So the way I did it last year, because the seeds are so tiny, I put a lot of them in a milk jug container, and then once they sprouted, I split them all apart and planted them, and they did awesome. So I am going to use that method again for this year. So again, the Lysianthus, we did talk about those a little bit earlier. So those are a 12 to 16 week before you plant them out. So you're adding 6 weeks onto that from your last frost date to figure out the date to start. So 16 to 24 weeks before, if I did the math right on that. So those they're so early. They just take forever to grow, but they're totally worth it. So the next one is sweet peas, and these are so fun to grow. We only need to start them inside 3 weeks before we plant them out. So I'm going to be waiting a while, 3 more weeks before I plant those inside, because you don't want them to get too big inside. You can prune them, which will help them inside too, but yeah, I also tried to direct sow some of these last year and they did nothing. So indoor is definitely what I'm going to be doing again this year. I did try to winter sow some last year, and they were ones that I seed saved, so that could be some of the failure there as well. But that winter sowing didn't work for me either for those. All right, next up is Status. This is one of my favorites as well. They are just so gorgeous and such a fun texture to add to your bouquets, and they dry super well too. So these I'm going to start about 4 weeks before I'm going to plant them out. So I'm going to wait a couple more weeks before I start those seeds. Then we have Stock, and this was my first year last year growing these, and they were phenomenal. I grew a spray type, so not a single cut like most Stock is a spray type, and they were Alto, I believe, Chanter. Sorry, I'm just going to check. There's also Quartet. I got all my seeds sitting here. Yeah, Chanter. Alto is one of the colors. So those are spray type. So they did rebloom for me, which was awesome because I don't really love to have wasted garden space as a hobby gardener. So those did awesome. Would highly recommend those. So those I'm going to start 4 weeks before planting those out. Okay, Bells of Ireland. I just have failed every time I've tried to start these. So I tried starting them inside, but it's not recommended. I tried direct sowing and they did nothing. And I've tried winter sowing and I got 1. So I'm going to try again this year. I'm going to do some winter sowing and some direct sowing and hope for some success. I've seen people though that get them to like not perennialize, but like they drop their seeds from, and they just like continually grow in the same spot because they are self-sowing. I have not had that luck. So we'll see if I can have some success with those this year. Love in a Mist are the next ones up, and those I'm going to winter sow and also direct sow. I did direct sow some last year with some success. They were very short though, which I've heard that is an issue with those. So we'll see what luck brings me this year. Orlea was one that was new for me this last year, and I direct sowed them, and I did have some success with that, but I also didn't mark well where I direct sowed them because I just did them in the landscaping. So I might have pulled some of them as weeds. And that's my fault. But the direct sowing did work. I am going to try to winter sow some of them as well, just so I don't have that issue in the spring when I'm weeding again. Next up is poppies, and these do need that cold stratification, so I will be winter sowing all of mine. And I've had great luck with winter sowing poppies in the past. It's probably my most successful winter sowing experience. Next is Black-Eyed Susan or Rudbeckia. And these I've grown a few times now. I believe, so like I started some from seed and I can't remember what kind they were. And they actually perennialized for me. They weren't supposed to, but that was awesome to have that happen. And last year I grew the Indian Summer variety and one other one. I probably have it in there somewhere. And the seedlings struggled so bad. They just looked so rough. But they did end up producing flowers for me. So I don't know. Those I'm going to start 6 weeks before my last frost. So 12 weeks. So I'm going to be starting those now as well. Scabiosa. So I grew Fama White and Fama Blue last year, and these should be perennials for me. And I did start them inside, and I'm going to start them inside now as well for planting out early. Then we have Strawflower. These are such beautiful flowers, and they make excellent dried flowers. They're so beautiful. They're such a unique flower. The sound and feel of them is like paper. They are really cool. So I would highly recommend growing these. And I'm going to be starting them now as well at 12 weeks inside. So the last two are Verbena bonariensis, which I also struggled with those seedlings. So I've actually taken cuttings last fall from the plants. Well, actually I dug one up and potted it up to try to keep it alive through winter. And I took cuttings and rooted those. So I do have some going already from last fall, and we'll see if I can make it through spring. They're doing okay so far. But I'm going to start more seed here now, 12 weeks before. Those I might be a little bit more careful with. They are pretty cold hardy though. So they may wait a little bit longer than the rest of the cool flowers. And then the last one is Feverfew. So 2 years ago, I started Feverfew inside and planted those out, and they actually perennialized for me here. So those ones that I started 2 years ago ended up out in my landscaping this last year. I started more, which went into my cut flower garden, but I'm guessing that because they self-seed, just a fair warning. So if you don't get the flowers picked and they go to seed, they will self-seed, which is kind of what I want out in my landscaping. I would like patches of them. So I have the magic single Feverfew of those. And then I also planted Virgo last year, which those went out into my landscaping as well. And I had some in the garden. The ones out in the landscaping did a lot better though. So I'm hoping those perennialize as well, and we'll see if they self-seed as well. That would be awesome. But I did get a new variety of Tetra White. So I'll be starting some of those inside as well. But Feverfew is my favorite filler, like especially the Magic Single. They're just so adorable little daisy-like flowers. The Virgo I didn't like it at first, but once I actually used it in some of the bouquets, like, oh my gosh, they were just like little sprinkles almost in there, just little white flowers. So I love those as well. Okay, so that rounds out the flowers. So for the vegetables, I have 4 that I'm going to start inside now. It is celery, we got shallots, we have onions, and we have kale. So all of these are cold hardy vegetables. They're going to get started now and planted out into the garden early. But I'm not going to go through all the cold hardy seeds for vegetables. I'll do a separate video for that one. All right, if you made it this far, thanks for joining today. I wish you much success in your cool flower or vegetable journey. This is going to be a fun season for me. I'm leaning much more into these things, which should lead to better success, as this is the way that these seedlings want to grow. So best of wishes for your cold journey this year, and happy gardening.